UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York Chris DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Welcome, everybody, to UAP Crossfire. This is a show where we don't hold back. We have a whole lot to talk about tonight, and we're going to get into it very shortly. But first, I want to tell you, this is a show that there's no holds bar. We call it the way it is. We take information in the ufology community, and we rip it apart. Only because we want you to get the truth and get opinions from everybody, whether you like it, you don't like it, but you're going to hear it here. So, very first thing I want to do is I want to introduce myself. I'm Chris DePerno. I'm one of the co-hosts of this show. I'm a retired major crimes detective, and I look at ufology as sort of like doing a criminal investigation. To the top is my man, Martin Willis. Martin Willis is a fantastic ufology person. Martin, how are you?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one tonight. And down right under me is the man, Commander Cobra. Commander Cobra is a pilot, and he is a UFO expert. Commander, how are you?
Very good. I would always debate my expertise in UFOs, but it's great to see all of you. And I would like to also say remembrance on Pearl Harbor Day today, an interesting day that I think has a tie into the subjects we talk about. And for those that celebrate, Happy Hanukkah.
Yep. And of course, I like his title, the Silverback of Ufology, the man who's been around longer than UFOs.
Every time I hear that silverback line, Chris, I think of that scene in 2001 where Moonwatcher's on the rock looking up at the moon just before he gets the big bone and bashes the skull.
I honestly,
it's Decker that I see in that moment.
You know that movie 2001 Space Odyssey where they had the monolith?
Yep.
Somehow I think Don has been around ufology so long, he probably built that monolith and stuff. Hello, Don. How are you, sir?
Don't ask. Don't ask. I won't tell. I don't want to leave the audience in tears today.
Oh, my God. Well, tonight we're going to discuss whistleblowers. Whistleblowers have been in the news, and everybody has been talking about whistleblowers here, whistleblowers there. And you know what? Are they good? Are they bad? Do they have good information? Are they trying to get disclosure out? We're going to tear them apart and see what the story is. And I'm going to start with the first one. And the first one is Michael Herrera. Now, a lot of people haven't heard about Michael Herrera. I know Martin has. But Michael Herrera is an ex-U.S. Marine whose account of stumbling across a secret military encounter with extraterrestrial forces. And he's now living in fear. Michael believes that there is a campaign by clandestine forces to silence him and protect top-secret UFO information. Herrera spent time as a 20-year-old rifleman on a Navy humanitarian mission after a major earthquake in the Sumatra area of Indonesia in 2009. This was a natural disaster in the area. Part of the mission, Michael, alongside with 5 other Marines, who I have not heard come forward, made a hike up the ridge to position themselves to receive humanitarian supply drops. Michael stated that he could see something moving and rotating and was changing colors between a very light matted gray and very dark matted black. He said that he saw what interpreted to be a UFO being stocked with weaponry. Now, he has changed his story and said that it wasn't weaponry, that it was human beings that this UFO was stockpiling. Okay. His crew, he did not have radios. They didn't have any radios and to report what they were seeing. So they approached the craft and got closer. However, after getting closer to the craft, a mysterious unit of black pajamaed men confronted him and his colleagues and seized their weapons. He detailed how the men warned him and the Marines to keep quiet about the flying saucers that they supposedly encountered in the jungle. Michael stated what he did to find out that he was being loaded, this UFO was being loaded with human, and he claims that the UFOs were human trafficking. That's his story. After this encounter, Michael got out of the Marines, but began having numerous accounts with helicopters hovering over his house. They were hovering over his dad's house, too. He says of a series of events that said were aimed at silencing him. Now, to just top this off, I want to play the short video.
In 2009, my unit, which was most decorated infantry battalion in the entire Marine Corps, which was 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, was called in to do humanitarian assistance operations out in the Philippines, which was Operation Quetzana, which we were attached to the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which conducts maritime operations all throughout Southeast Asia, in conjunction with the 7th Naval Fleet, which houses one landing helo deck, or LHD, among LPDs, which is what I was on, called a USS Denver. Ironically, that's where I'm from, so kind of felt like home. Now, during that operation in Quetzana in the Philippines, they had actually heard that a tsunami and earthquake hit the western part of Sumatra, which is western Indonesia, Padang City more specifically. Out of all the ships in the 7th Fleet, the ship I was on was the only one that was routed to that location, which was oddly strange, but then again, this is my first humanitarian operation, so I don't know the logistics of it, but if the skipper of the ship would probably know that information. So this happened September 30th. We ended up getting called and dropped anchor around October 8th. We are briefed in the ward room, which is the officers' mess, where they eat like their cafeteria per se. We're briefed that there is some of President Obama's family members that are present on either in the city or somewhere near there. They had a SEAL platoon that was ready to go to retrieve those people. Us knowing well that Indonesia is also the 2nd largest terrorist capital where they train these guys, and they'll send them up to whatever theater of operation where anybody wants a piece of the United States, they ship them up to go handle it. So we know that well, and we were then briefed that we were going to be armed during this operation, just to also provide security for the transportation coming to basically drop off medical supplies, sheltering items, food, purified water, things like that.
Now, as Michael gets into his story, I want to play this second short video, and then we're going to discuss it.
And right there was something that stuck out like a sore thumb, especially with jungle terrain, things like that. Vegetation, very green stuff, was something that stuck out so well. It's always going to be basically imprisoned in my mind for the rest of my life, and it has been for 14 years, was something that was rotating, and it was transitioning between colors like a light matte gray as well as a dark matte black. So in between, that's what it kept, and it was very smooth. We had all looked at each other as we got online, and we decided to investigate. The further thing I want to say is that I actually took pictures and video of this before we actually trucked down. We had a dump pouch where we basically, if we expend ammunition, we want to retain our magazines, so we put those there. So I dropped my camera in there, and we decided to go down. We didn't have any communications, which was weird, and that was a very odd thing, and it's something that either could have been good that we didn't, or it could have been something that could have been very bad. And it just however you want to look at that. Once we got down this slope, we were approximately 150 meters away from this craft. That's what it reminded me of, and I had trouble scanning the IDs. As this is going on, we're going back between these guys as well as what's going on in the background. At that time, there was 4 of these trucks, which were F-350s. They were up-armored. They were pretty beefy. They had weapon cases that I've seen before because of something that we've actually loaded weapons into. They had 2 of them that were in the back of each truck. They also had these containers that was illustrated right here, which come to find out through recent revelations from yesterday from somebody who came forward to Dr. Greer. I don't know who they are, but what they had told him and what he has told me is that this gentleman knows exactly what these were used for because they had like a cylinder on the front, which is either for oxygen or what I had hypothesized was for vacuum sealing, which lead me to suspect that they were smuggling narcotics or drugs. Come to find out it's more disturbing than that. This gentleman has firsthand account with this and says that it was for people. It's very disheartening, especially because that part of the world have already gotten ravaged, and it's something that is very hard to see right now because of what I've witnessed, and it's very disheartening. And this is why I'm up here. So they loaded these onto this platform that you can see right there, and as I got up there, like I said, I was going back and forth. These guys are still searching our stuff. They're still, pointing their weapons at us. And after the last 2 trucks that I saw that actually got into that platform unloaded, they had 4 guys in each truck that would unload everything. However they did it, I can't tell you because, again, I was focused on this as well. And these trucks drove off. And as that happened, they told us we were not allowed to look back. 2, that we were not able to talk about this. They were actually 2 of the guys were actually talking about either, hey, should we smoke these guys right now? That's what they kept saying. It was kind of feeding more into the fear at that point because, again, I don't know who these guys are. I know they had American gear. They had American sidearms as well. If these guys have actually taken an oath like we have, and then why they're going against people like us and even willing to kill servicemen who just even stumbled onto this, it just blows my mind, and it's very sick. So fast tracking back when we returned back to Okinawa, one day I had got a call from the duty that was in the barracks. Each barracks has like a duty of Marines. They're making sure there's still order, things like that. He had been told that I needed to go up to the CP, so he informed me. So I had hightailed it up there. And oddly enough, there was nobody in the building, except for one gentleman who was wearing Air Force dress blues that was missing a name tag, which I understand in Air Force policy or regulations that they were supposed to wear a name tag, and he did not have that. I gave him the proper greeting of the day, gave him the salute. He had pulled me into an office, and he had said, you are not allowed to tell anybody in your chain of command. I don't care if it's a general. I don't care if it's anybody. You are not allowed to talk about what happened. You can go to prison for this, or you could be killed. So he slid over a non-disclosure agreement, and it had 2 things that I can recall to this day as I quickly skimmed through it, because, again, I had thought we were going to forget about this whole mess. And one was said TSSCI, and the other said Indonesia.
Okay, I want to hit this.
Go for it,
Okay.
Don.
Okay. Now, my life experience, I've had to blend 2 aspects of it. My life as a criminal investigator and my life as a military operative, okay? First and foremost, my first question would be, what in the hell did this guy change his story for? Okay? First, he claimed they were loading weapons onto this object, this craft.
That's correct.
Later, and how much later, by the way, did he change it to people? Okay, do you know, Chris? Do you have any idea?
No, and that's
Okay.
that's the interesting part.
I think he said
change it
both.
to the-
Didn't he
Say
say
that, Mark?
weapons and then he saw the cylinders that he assumed
No, he said
was
he
human?
said weapons, and then he said no, it was people. Okay.
Talked about
Now,
these sealed containers.
here's the next thing, and I have some firsthand knowledge of this from my time in Southeast Asia. This guy is claiming that he has had threats on his life. Look, if somebody wanted him room temperature, he wouldn't be out there talking. Okay? And I'm telling you right now, if somebody in authority wanted this guy silenced, he'd be gone. All right? He'd be history. He'd just be a memory. So I kind of call bullshit on that. Obviously, I was not there. Okay? I have no idea what he saw, but this I will tell you. From my time in the bush, if armed individuals had approached me and my patrol and attempted to disarm us, there would have been a damn firefight right there. I will not read my lips. I will not relinquish my weapon. Okay. And this guy allegedly was a combat Marine. Okay. And the combat Marines I knew would never have relinquished their weapons.
Yeah, but Don, they weren't fighting the enemy.
I don't
These
care.
guys-
I don't care. I don't care. You're out on an operation. You're on a mission. Okay. Carrying out your country's mandate, whatever that is. And armed people approach you and demand you relinquish your firearms, your weapons. Fuck that. Never going to happen. Never. Okay.
Well, I will tell you this. I don't know if I would fire upon another American. I mean, being a U.S. Marine, combat Marine myself, being a U.S. Marine, I could tell you if I stumbled across other Americans, you know, I mean, I'm caught by surprise, and I'm saying,
how do you know they were American? How do you know they weren't East German? How do you know they weren't Russian?
No, wait a minute, Don. He says they're Americans. He says that there's.
Hey, I've known Russians that could
Don, you're
speak damn near
blasting
perfect English.
Watch your mic, Don. You're blasting us.
And stuff. But anyways, so I see what you're saying. And if it was anybody else than an American, you're kind of taken by surprise because you're kind of saying, first of all, their mission was not to find this. They stumbled into this.
Did those supposedly Americans have weapons pointed at those Marines? That's all I needed. Okay. No, pal, that's all I would need.
I can understand that. And you know what? And I can appreciate that. But I could see this guy being taken by surprise going, what the hell? I mean, you know, he looks at this guy, he sees his accent, he hears him, and he's saying to himself, this is another American. Did we stumble onto something? And you just don't know. But here's the thing that you did bring up, Don, that I do agree with you. He says that he saw containers, and he said that these containers were for weapons, but he did change his story. Now, how does he know it's human trafficking if he saw containers? That's where his story does change, where I think it's a bunch of crap. Right.
Well, if you listen
I guess I'm thrown off because.
Let me go to
Go ahead,
Martin
Martin.
first.
Sorry.
Martin?
No, if you listen to him, he talks about on the front were these sealed containers. And then he said that's when he theorizes that, and he's only saying it's a theory that it could be human trafficking in that particular point that he makes. But I do want to say something to what Don said also, because I had this person on, Jonathan Wygant, was on my show, who was also a Marine and had a Peru encounter. This was what he basically came upon in the Amazon. And this thing also was changing colors. Not only that, the fluid that was leaking out of it was changing colors as well. And he was 3 on point. He was on point, and there were 3 of them. There were, I think, 2 sergeants and himself. He was up at the craft looking at it. And these guys in black camo, exactly what this guy is talking about, all came on them again with weapons. And they were Americans. He thinks they were a Department of Energy for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why he thinks that. But he was also threatened and forced to give up his weapon. And this is 1997. Don, what I'm wondering is, have things maybe softened a little bit, later on after, I know you were in, I'm not sure exactly what time frame you were in, but maybe when there's Americans involved, like you're saying, are you going to have fire against an American if you're a Marine, if an American comes up to you?
Would I fire if they tried to disarm me and I'm out on an operation, a mission, and they threaten me? You bet your ass. I'd cut them in 2.
Well, okay.
Well, that's pretty clear.
Maybe things have changed. I don't know what to say about that. But the same thing happened with Jonathan himself and the 2 people he was with. They dropped their weapons, and he was shackled and taken away. So
let's get Commander Cobra in here. Commander.
Okay, to answer a quick comment that came up, Commander Cobra is a Air Force and Coast Guard active duty vet. Spent time on exchange with the Navy, and then in my contractor days, I spent a lot of time with the Army and Special Operations Command, SOCOM. I got a little different take. I think Marine Herrera's description, as I followed it, they saw the craft, or what appears to be a craft. Interesting, there's not a lot of detail about the craft, what it was doing, aside from the color change. I'll touch upon this running into the other individuals that were armed that seemed to have control of security of the site. He talked about weapons cases that he had saw in those up armored Ford pickups, which is a pretty common. They go through series. It's very, very common to see series of vehicles like this show up. You know, they go through different companies vie for those contracts. And I thought that's the weapons that he was talking about, the containers. Then I understood that he talked about there's two parts of the container. There's the cargo section, and then there's a silver canister, which he thought was for pressurization to keep a vacuum. I thought that was the silver container he was talking about, the kind of the capsule thing. So I had a little bit different take on that. I don't know much about this case. What I do immediately pick upon is that and I take people at their face value until I learn otherwise, and how much I'm able to delve into it. And without the benefit of being able to talk to him, he has a PTSD kind of cadence as he's talking about this. Something occurred. He had some kind of very stirring emotional event. On these ops, and part of my life, we had very strict ROE. There was a lot of what I call, as people probably remember from my show, I was pretty sure my first part of my career was Mad Magazine Spy versus Spy. That was the playbook. Because a lot of times you didn't know all the ops, you didn't know all the players, and there was a lot of very tense moments, people facing each other down. In the world since Desert Storm and the kind of level of activity that goes on with different contracting and non-uniformed but government members involved in different activities, this doesn't sound like a scenario too far off of what happens on a fairly frequent basis, especially overseas. And a lot of special operators do not wear uniforms. So to have a confrontation and have people, which would seem from on Don's part to be a really big breakdown, wouldn't surprise me very much if all the other things that were happening in this event that he described. I would have liked to heard more or get a chance to talk to him about the craft, what he thought was going on there, or was there something else associated with this particular thing that's emanating the lights and doing that. With nothing more to go on from what he has said, convinced he had some kind of an experience. And it doesn't surprise me, and I think it fits the scenario really well on a number of things that other people have talked about when they've had this. I sat in on an interview for Mac Maloney's show, who's done a lot of research of UFOs and military activity. He's done a lot of historical analysis. He had a gentleman on, and the gentleman was actually talking about the unit that I was part of, being dispatched to go to do a recovery in then East Germany. And he had a lot of it right. He had a lot of stuff right that somebody had to maybe give some pretty detailed information. And then in some other stuff, he went right off of it. And he would never talk to me one-on-one, this gentleman, and has pretty much dropped out of sight. He won't even talk about it. I haven't seen him come up since that. And that's going back a few years. But there, to me, is a certain cadence in the way he is delivering this that gives me a lot to believe that there was a significant emotional event that occurred for him and how that all fits together. And to be quite honest, I think a lot of times people who have those kind of reactions, it goes back to, which is a really interesting playbook that goes back to the 50s and 60s, where they are used, they're set up, they get certain amounts of the information, and they use them as a false flag, for lack of a better term. It's kind of a popular term these days, but they use them to put partial truth out to get people to be attentive, go off in different directions, and they can't control it, so they overload it. And I think that goes on quite a bit.
Deuce, I've got one question for you.
Yes, sir.
Would you have relinquished your weapon?
Probably not in the way that he phrases it, Don. I've had my hand on a weapon, clearly indicating to the other person that I am not very happy, and that person had every appearance of being a fellow quote unquote American in a fairly tense standoff. I've seen this happen before, so I don't know enough of the detail to know what's going on. I also do know that if presented with overwhelming force, I can see people standing down and complying. So that doesn't surprise me. I don't know what this guy's, I understand what he was explaining what his mission was. I have problems about how they arrived to this, how they got separated, how they don't have radios. And he touches
Don't you
upon
find
that
that
this
funny, Commander? That
it's not funny.
It's
It's
on a mission.
I would have been more willing to gloss over that if the radio didn't work, because that's what I'm used to. I'm used to have very little of it ever went like a Tom Clancy where everything worked. More of it went like, God, I wish I had more batteries. I wish we had more of everything else that was going on, because it never seems to quite fit. So some of the lead up to this doesn't. And I here's the thing I want to touch upon. John Burroughs and I became really good friends when I had him on my show. I sat with him and a couple others, and I think John's journey and his experience at Rendlesham really is one of the best and probably one of the most talked about events that occurred. Whatever that vehicle was, whatever that encounter was, is a lot there. And it has all the hallmarks of the people that show up, people that claim that didn't happen, the people that said they were in charge. And John had the physical manifestations, obviously, that appears to be an outgrowth of his experience, and how he was shuffled off. Had a successful career in the Air Force, and he really does have some important observations to his experiences that he had. So I use that one often as a measure against all the other accounts that I've heard and seen. And times have changed. That was in the 80s. This is now a completely different world that we're operating in. And I will say this. There are so many interesting organizations that have armed special operators as part of them. I mean, it is incredible, the AKA SWAT team to higher levels of capabilities that are running around doing business, in addition to contracted forces and contracted operations. It's a very amazing world we live in. I'd like to hear more. I would like to see a little bit more about this, Mr. Herrera, Marine Herrera. But I am convinced he experienced something. Just there's some stuff leading up to this that I can't quite tie up.
Go ahead, Martin, because I want to get to Don ask him a couple of questions about this.
Yeah, well, Commander, you were asking earlier. You mentioned you wanted to know more about the craft. For some reason, Michael, I watched the whole interview when he first did that, and for some reason, he thinks that's a reverse engineered craft owned by us. Which I don't know exactly why he came up with that, but he says, I believe he said there were rivets. It was rotating. There was a platform on the ground, and the platform with all the arms on it or whatever it was lifted up to it before it rotated and went up inside of it. I guess floated away. What's that? I think he was just speculating that he thought it was. He was saying that it was, we were using it, so I think he assumed that it was something reverse engineered. Maybe a craft that we built off of another model or something. That was his assumption. And here's another thing that someone put, this is true. According to other interviews, Michael has since been contacted by someone from the Pentagon and has taken him to an underground base and seen more things from this event. Now, that's, to me, when it goes, it's a little out there to me, but I don't really know, anything's possible. But I mean, his story sounded really intact, and then he seems to be talking about other things as well. So I'm not so sure how that is.
I want to get to Don, because Don has done real. Hold on one second. I want to get to Don because Don has done real time operations. Don, would you ever take a fire team out without a radio, knowing you could be going into okay, that's number one. That's like Commander Cobra said. That to me right there makes me very suspicious, because I have never heard of any.
Or if there was some kind of a narrative, Chris, that went along with that explained how the radio was lost, or
he said he wasn't given radios.
Right. That's an interesting part to it. I mean, there could be something sinister. Was this team being offered up? Were they supposed to walk into this? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities that go on with it, but there's an inconsistency at that level that throws me off a little tiny bit. And maybe that was a very young.
This is where I wanted to. Yeah, but here's the other thing, Don. And you, with your expertise, if you were given exact orders and an exact mission, you would carry that out. You wouldn't be wandering someplace else, would you?
Well, of course.
Okay. So his actual thing was to secure an LZ for humanitarian aid. His 5 Marines, his fire team, was to support a landing zone. Why would you take off from your mission to go wander over the crest of a hill to another area and stumble into this?
Well,
that to me is very. I know. Being a Marine, I get jacked up if I did that.
This is something else that I didn't articulate it when I first spoke. I had all these other things that I wanted to address, but I was not impressed by his professionalism or lack thereof, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, like I said earlier, I wasn't there. I don't know what the heck happened. I don't know what happened previous to their seeing this light. But if you are on an operation, usually it's a time sensitive thing. You are not going to be able to go out and wander around nilly-willy, okay, especially if you've got no commo. Now that in itself right there, that's a major red flag for me, okay, major red flag. And then to encounter unknowns, and I don't care, okay, believe me, I don't care. You've been around enough, Chris. Commander Cobra has been around enough to know that you can run into people that are not American that sound, by God, just about as American as anybody else. All right?
Right.
And they're threatening you to lay down your weapons, and you're on an op? No. This just ain't going to happen. And to answer Martin's question, 69 through 72 is when I was in, Martin. 1969 to 72. Now, granted, probably a heck of a lot has changed. I'm sure it has since that time frame. But giving up your weapon, that comes from, I was a SWAT team, when I was a cop, I was a SWAT team sniper. Actually, I was a secondary sniper. I carried the 5.56. The primary had the 308. But I was a SWAT team member. And the one maximum that any cop, Chris, will tell you, you never give up your weapon. Never. And even if you get shot, and I have been shot several times, you don't give up your weapon. And that's just the way it is. And let the chips fall where they may. Now that
Here's
may
the other
sound
thing that
like a lot. That may sound like a lot of, rah rah, hoo hoo, rah rah crap, but that's the way it is.
The one
Now, I'm
other
wondering-
thing that makes me suspicious is that. Go ahead, Martin. Go ahead, buddy.
All right. I was just wondering, in the case of Jonathan Wygant, they were on a rescue mission, not like they were on a rescue mission because they thought friendly aircraft had crashed, basically. So I don't know if that makes any difference with, but he said he knew they were Americans, not only by the way they were talking, but their sidearms or whatever it was. It was their weaponry. He knew they were Americans when they came up to him. So I don't know, and I don't know why he strongly thinks they were the Department of Energy, and which I think is kind of interesting because, perhaps they thought this thing may be a nuclear type of situation or something like that. I don't know.
Well, let me just throw in a quick turn. If it's a rescue op, Martin, and it's in a not friendly country, or it's not, it's a sensitive.
It was a friendly company.
They're trying to do the recovery.
It was a friendly situation. Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be different elements that roll into that. I mean, if you're on a rescue recovery, because it's really recovery if you know where it's at. If you're on that kind of op and you're armed, that there's a specific reason why you're doing that, and it sounds like he was doing it at night. So it's either that there's time to get to possible people that are there, or you're trying to secure a site pretty quickly. That's usually the reason behind it. So again, I don't know enough about that particular story. It doesn't throw me off that they have those factors going in there. I just in the case with Mr. Herrera, I'm a little bit. Who else? How no one else has come forward on this.
That's true.
I'd like to
That's
get the
true,
other
Commander.
viewpoint.
All right, I'd like to go around the table and get a conclusion on Michael Herrera. I want to start with Don Ecker. Don, you heard what facts that we put out on the table? What's your conclusion of this guy?
80% negative, and I'll leave 20% in there on the possibility that something in fact did happen.
Martin?
But what is anybody's guess?
Yeah, mine too. Martin?
I watched his entire interview and I thought he was pretty convincing. And like Commander says, something happened that really you can just tell when he's talking, and it really affected him. So I would say I'm more like 60 to 70% that at least that part of it might have happened.
Commander?
Well, I never want to be put in that dumber, so there is a chance kind of category. I tend to probably be a little bit more even on this. I'm kind of a 50-50 guy, only because I don't have enough about this. So that's how I would land on this one. I'd like to know more. I would like to have kind of a one-on-one, not trying to record it, just to talk to him, to break it out a little bit, to ask some of those questions of the things that we brought up. And then I'd like to also know where his leadership was in this whole thing. Sending guys out. Nobody's got comms. They're armed. What was the breakdown of the unit? Where's the E6, E7 leading this patrol? What's going on? There's a whole bunch of things that don't jive, but I've seen enough screwed up stuff that somebody thought was a good idea. Put together. So I'll never rule out the stupidity of how that could get worked.
And that is true. But here's my take on Michael Herrera. One, and this is the one thing that sticks out. I have never seen a fire team, a unit in the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army, and like Don, and you, Commander, and Martin, you're absolutely smart enough to know this. You're not going to go into any type of situation without some kind of radio to yell for help. Okay? If they're stupid enough, if this guy is dumb enough not to go to his commanding officer and go, I don't have any radios, I need a radio down there because God forbid something should happen and I need to call you. And his commanding officer would be so derelict not to have comms down there. That's number one. Number two, if I was an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, which I was in the Marines, and I decided to take a ferry trip over the hill instead of staying on point with my mission, I would be busted so fast. I mean, they couldn't take the chevrons off my shoulders fast enough. So for me to think that this guy is being told, you're on point on a humanitarian mission, you're to take this LZ and hold it to make sure humanitarian stuff goes there. Now, the other thing about this story is if these guys are super special operators, men in black and everything else, you would think they'd have a couple of scouts going, hey, there's a fire team coming over the hill, guys. We got to get, we got to do something before these guys come over here. They should be smart enough to know that you got a humanitarian aid going, a couple clicks away maybe, or whatever it is. So, Don, does that make sense to you that if you're the super element secret team and you don't know that this is happening, you don't see the choppers coming in, you don't see all this other stuff coming in saying we either got to scrub our mission or we got to move it or something?
I changed my assessment. I'm now 85% negative.
Wow, see, I'm a convincing person. All right, so that's enough with Michael Herrera. We're going to go on. Martin, you're up next.
Oh, well, yeah. So the format of the show, basically, I misunderstood. So I'll do what I can with this. So I understood like a few minutes before the show started exactly what the format is.
Throw me right under the bus, Martin. Go ahead.
I'm not saying it's your fault. It's the way I read it. I couldn't read it. I read it improperly. So David Grusch, to me, as we all know, that he does state that he's never seen anything firsthand. He has not seen any craft. He's not seen any non-human intelligence that he talks about. Everything is secondhand. But I think where he stands his ground, in my opinion, is that he went through all the whistleblower channels in the proper way and could talk about everything that he could talk about in a public forum that he could put out there and then try to get the information out there. And I really do think that, there is something to this. He started, whether you don't believe him or you do believe him, he is a true whistleblower. Some of these aren't, but he is a true whistleblower. And whether you believe him or not, I do believe he started a ball rolling that is going to get to more transparency. I mean, unfortunately, what everyone was fighting for, the Schumer Rounds Act, has been more or less gutted. It's not going to have any teeth to it, really, to speak of. So it looks like that's what is going to be passing. And but I will say this: if you had not heard the name David Grusch, I don't believe that any of this act would be at all out there, to be voted on to begin with. So I do believe that he has helped a lot. I know, the biggest argument is, he's never seen anything firsthand. And, perhaps this is disinformation. I hear people say that. But I do believe that he believes in what he's saying. And he has been doing what he thinks is the right thing. That's all I got on that.
I'd like to play a short video of David Grusch with his interview with Joe Rogan. If we can, let's do this.
It's how the U.S. knew something weird happened in Italy right before World War II. But
so this was 33 was the first documented.
That is the earliest one I can talk about. Yeah,
there's something that predates that.
You could infer that.
Yeah.
So this shaped thing. And there was nothing in it. It was just an artifact. There was no biological remnants, if you will. So it's so funny because the Italians were so confused they actually called up the Germans and they were like, is this one of your Wunderwaffe? Like, what the hell just crashed in northern Italy? Mussolini. And this is all publicly available information because some Italian researchers found all these original documents that some people were sitting on for years in Italy. They put a gag order on the press, etc. And Mussolini asked the Germans to come down. And of course, the Germans came down and they were like, that is not ours, but let's look at it together. So that's kind of perhaps a tertiary reason the kind of Axis powers got together. I'm not saying that's like the reason, but I think the Italians and the Germans were so intrigued with what they found from like an artifact perspective. There was at least some scientific and military collaboration during the war, the details of which I'm not sure of, but I know people that know that specific event that are currently still intel officers within this program in detail. But
well, that's unfortunate. I didn't
Martin?
see that. Yeah, that's very unfortunate. He's talking about that, and I have not seen that that particular interview on Joe Rogan, but that it's a well-known hoax, that whole thing, and it's been debunked. So that makes me, when I hear him talk about something like this, makes me think that he's being fed this stuff to get out there and to mix up with his other, to kind of bring his own reputation down and credibility down, that he's being fed this stuff, because that's all documented. That's a documented hoax.
Good stuff. Don?
Well, I was going to say that I spoke with Kevin Randall about that. And when this story first surfaced of the alleged Italian crash of a UFO, Randall did a lot of in-depth digging. He's got colleagues over in Italy, and he told me right up front, he said, this is a hoax from A to Z. All right, there's no truth to it whatsoever. I said, okay. And now I'm not coming down either way. I personally have never looked into it, but Randall was ironclad that this was a hoax. Now, going to Grusch once again, and we've all heard it, we know it. Grusch has even admitted it, that everything he's come forward with, he's acknowledged these were stories that he personally was told, okay, by his intel weenies behind him. Now, I don't know, because it would have been in closed session, if he basically identified who his sources were in closed testimony, but it would seem imperative to me that the Congress would have to contact these people that allegedly do have firsthand information and experience with these and find out what the real story is. I find it curious that they would parade Grusch out there, a guy that has zero firsthand experience or encounters. And there's one other thing, I've mentioned it on a previous show, but the mother of all UFO crash retrieval stories was Roswell. And he was cautioned about not being permitted to discuss the Roswell event. The Roswell event is one of the reasons we're all here today talking about this. What exactly did happen at Roswell in 1947? So that's always been a bit of a red flag for me.
Commander.
It's always tough to follow Don after this. I do not like the secondhand kind of part of his various presentations. I tend to fall back, and I have very low chops compared to to the three of you when it comes to this kind of investigation, but the kind of stuff that I had to do in the military taught you a certain order of events, and one of them is getting as close to the actual witness and getting that statement and finding out what that source is. It's done, indicated, maybe behind closed doors they were able to work and contact and get what he was passed. I take a step back and go, well, why is he doing this? Why is he allowed to do this? Why is, as some of the folks have put into the chat, why is he a puppet of this? What purpose does this serve? It seems to me that it fueled legislation that was going to open up files and materials and get some ground truth. I tend to take a slightly different bend on it. One of the most permissive and prevalent intelligence gathering operations that goes on now, especially with our use of social media, is crowdsourcing. It's very, very, very economical to do. You don't need a lot of security clearances, and you put items into the social media framework, and then you watch and see what happens. You watch where activity expands. You watch where discussions go, how they spread out. Case in point, name a major political, religious figure. A story will be leaked or a report will be put out that person is going to make a trip and go to some location. And security people will now watch to see if what they suspect is sells or where that information goes and who's interested in it. Is that what's happening to us on a UAP event? Are we being studied to see where the interest is? Is it politically viable to go further with this? Because nobody does anything anymore in the world of politics without studying it, having polls and surveys to see how they're going to land and maintain power and position. So is this what's happening with Mr. Grusch? I have a lot of issues with how he presents. I don't like the constant, well, I was told, I've seen, that lacks authenticity, but there are things that he talks about that seem to me to be a little bit more than just beyond repeating that it's something that he has pretty good information and seen. I've never flown a MiG airplane, but things that I was able to read, things that I was able to train and participate with would give me a pretty good chance that I could give you a pretty good dissertation on some of the older airplanes when we were exploiting that and that information was being passed out. So he does have some credibility with me from that standpoint. I do like the fact that it's putting some energy into it. I get tired that we don't seem to get past. We don't get to grab the next rung. We just don't seem to jump up to the next rung. And yes, the case in Italy it really does tarnish a lot of what he says. It's hard to understand why that one would have gone the way it did.
Before we go we're going to be going to a hard break here very shortly. But before we do, I want to.
Kidding me? Is this time travel? We've been only talking like 15 minutes. You got to be kidding me.
The time is just fly by when you're having fun. You know,
you kids, you're keeping me up again.
Let me play this video, and then if we got time, we'll discuss it. If not, after the hard break, we'll come back and discuss it.
Yeah, Paul Mellon and all these other affluent guys of all these old money families that basically created the CIA. So that's probably the reason why.
So this thing that was recovered, this was the first documented one that the United States had access to?
I can't get into if it was the first or not, but it was an early one.
Very early.
Yeah.
So it's almost 100 years ago.
Yes.
And so they take this thing and then they bring it where?
Yeah, I can't get into those.
Can't get into
details.
that.
No.
Okay. So they bring it somewhere in the United States. And was the attempt to try to back engineer this thing? Was the attempt to try to understand what it was?
Yeah, I mean, first of it, obviously, it's understanding the situation, right? What do we have our hands on? And like I've said in some other videos and stuff, that we took the Manhattan Project secrecy and overlaid it on this issue because that secrecy worked well for atomic bomb developments and whatnots. And certainly this whole program in a nutshell, if I were to summarize the 90 plus years of history, it is a reverse engineering program.
All right, so we kind of got an idea about this. And so what I want to do is we're going to take a hard break right now. And when we come back, we're going to discuss a little bit more about David Grusch. And then we're going to go into a great person, Commander Fravor and Bob Lazar.
And also, I would like to take a few minutes after the break to discuss what I believe was a firsthand intelligence operation directed at me and my panelists at an event that took place in Orlando, Florida in January 1995 at Disney World. It was beyond any doubt a first-class intelligence operation, and it only became clear several years later. And this is a hell of a story. And I've told it before, and nobody up to this point genuinely seems to grok it, Chris. They don't grok it. And it's as plain as the nose on your face.
Well, after the break, we'll grok it. We'll be right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected. Only at kgradb.com.
We are back at UAP Crossfire. I just can't get over that UFO thing. Anyways, before we get into Don's story, because I will really want to get into that, Martin, I want to ask you about the last video we just saw.
I'm sorry, I was doing my nails. So I didn't catch it. Yeah. No, we had a break. No, this is something, again, I haven't heard him talk about this before. So, I really don't know. And, I mean, what we're seeing here, a lot of people in the chat are making comments where, Grusch is perhaps a puppet or something. And, I never thought so at first, but it makes me wonder a little bit, because, I mean, he did testify under oath. I do believe he was saying things that he thought were to be true. I mean, why would he go through all this for
I
nothing?
don't think he's lying. I agree with Commander Cobra saying, and I think Don will agree. I think he's being fed. Look, in the next video, he admits that everything he talks about, he has to be briefed. He has to, because he's an intelligence officer. And an intelligence officer is not just going to go on television and say, hey, guys, I'm just going to tell you everything I know, unless he wants to get locked up. So he actually admits to Joe Rogan. He tells Joe Rogan, hey, I got to go through this intelligence briefing. I have to submit everything I'm talking about. I have to get approval. They tell me what I can and cannot. Because he says during any interview that I talked to him about, I'm not allowed to talk about Roswell. I'm not allowed to talk about this. I'm not allowed to talk about that. And then the people he does, I truly believe he was briefed, and I truly believe that he was told these stories. But do the people who are telling the stories, are they feeding them false information? The best way to put a lie is between two truths. And so, and we all know that because we've talked to liars before. And if you're crafty enough to put a lie between two truths, you can get away with it. And maybe Grusch fell into that because he's a patriot. I'm not going to condemn the man. I think the man is sincere in certain reports, but I do believe that he was probably fed some false information on that. Commander, what do you think? And you're muted, by the way.
Well, that's because when Martin tells me that he's doing his pedicure, I don't want to spit my wine up all over the screen and get us, into some kind of trouble. You've captured the essence of it. I've been reading a lot of the stuff in the chat, so I got to make a couple points because there's some really super bright people that come in onto the comments. Is this disinformation? What's the purpose of him being out there if he's presenting that? And yes, I'm sure if you put him on a polygraph, I think he would pass the polygraph. People do pass polygraphs when they believe they're telling the truth. That happens. So I'm not dissuading what he threw or put there. I think that he believes what he has seen, what he's been briefed, what he's researched. He believes. What's the purpose behind him out here putting that information out? Is there some desire that there's, groups in conflict in the whatever you want to call it, the various government agencies and organs out there that some want the information out there because they want to have it revealed, and then others don't. As a number of people in chat put it, and you've heard my stance on this before, I don't need this to believe or know that I am correct about what my conclusions are. I probably don't have all of it correct on any of these events, to be quite honest, without hard fact to show what's occurred. But sometimes when you get a personality, a cult, and I don't mean it in the negative, but a personality cult around different people, it takes on its own characteristics. It does have kind of a religious overtone, and you start to gloss over what is the reason. If your belief is based on faith, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I participate in a religious experience because it's faith. I don't have anything but what I know as I've understood it. And that's how I kind of feel about a lot of the stuff. Now, when we get down to specific events and we're looking at things, if it doesn't add up, I do have questions that I want to get answered to try to figure out where the fact is and where I have to make a conclusion, or I'm going to go along with the story that's being passed to me. But the overall part of this, my biggest thing I want to know is what's the purpose of coming forward on this? How was this person allowed to be passing these stories out with limits that are put forward, and to do that? Are we being subjected to and opt to track who's interested, who shows up at our show, who shows up at any of these events? Because the history goes back to agencies doing this in the 50s and 60s, partially to protect and try to cover activities that were going on with the advanced aircraft. That's a fact out there. That
is a fact.
Yeah, people were subjected at conferences and conventions with, partially things that were going on, and pushed into the realm of UFO activity to help keep cover over breakthroughs that they were making in aircraft. I would tend to think probably very traditional air-breathing air-type aircraft, but you guys know my theories on the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into that a little later. Don, your thoughts about Grusch before we go to your story?
I think he is, in a word, being used as a useful idiot. I mean no dispersion on him, but I think he was presented because, hey, look, you got to have an idea how these people, and I'm talking, when I say these people, I'm talking about the intelligence types, how they view a situation. Grusch, just by my superficial looking at this scenario, Grusch is a perfect patsy, if you will, to put out there. Because if he makes too much of a fire, he's somebody that can be damaged. And at one point, they already attempted to damage him by coming out with the business about him seeing a psychiatrist, psychologist, being somewhat on the spectrum, if you know what I'm talking about, the autism spectrum. He's somebody that if they have to crush, they can with a concerted effort. Now, that's not to take anything away from the man. Number one, he is an officer. I'm sure he's a patriotic American. He's doing what he was asked to do, but he's also hobbled in the fact that he is going out and basically spoon feeding to the media and Congress what he himself has been spoon fed. Perfect case in point's the Italian thing. Okay. This alleged Italian crash retrieval back in the 30s. I think we're all pretty aware that is, there's no credence to that story at all. So
why would the Vatican give it to the Germans?
Well, hey, that's a whole nother level, Chris. We could go in a myriad of directions with that and the Vatican in the 30s and 40s. Okay. They had, let's just say they had their problems. Remember what they said about the Pope at that time? That was Hitler's Pope. Okay. So, hey, what happened at the end of the war? All those SS officers, those hardcore Nazis that got the hell out of there. How? By grabbing Vatican passports and what have you. They had a whole operation to get those Nazis out of Europe. So yeah, that's another thing entirely. But I think Grusch, unfortunately, is being used, and ultimately he's going to be abused.
Martin, last word.
Well, here's something, someone in chat just posted. Intelligence Inspector General said his claims were urgent and credible. So I go back to what Commander was talking about. Like, at what end? At what end would all of this be? You know, what would be what would if he is being fed disinformation and he feels like it's enough where it is urgent that he has to get the word out there? Why? Why would they do that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, and so it's a big puzzle. And I do think, people have mentioned, he's a patriot. He's sincere. He seems to be very sincere, in my opinion, of him actually admitting to his faults and things like that. He's human, and but he's also highly intelligent. Most people on the spectrum are, as he claims, but he's highly intelligent, and I don't think I can't see any motivation in why he would do this for, what is it, fame, for money? I don't think so. I don't
There's
think
no
that's
fame or money in
part of this.
ufology. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
I
anyway,
agree.
I think he's a patriot. I think he seems like a really good person, and so I would hate to think that he's been, kind of used as a patsy and to get disinformation out there and to basically destroy him and crush Grusch. That's kind of a sad thing to think that he could be taken down some notches. For what purpose, I have no idea.
We'll leave it at that.
Chris, let me just throw one quick. Let me throw one quick thing before Don goes. Samuel Clemens, I bring it up on the show quite a bit, aka Mark Twain. Black ants, red ants in the jar. Everything's going fine. Everybody's moving, doing things. Then the jar gets picked up, then it gets shaken, and the ants are tearing into each other. I bring that up because a lot of times, if I was running and I wanted to hobble UAP, UFO discussion, this is exactly how I would do it. I would put out fact, I would put out information, and I would have people say the guy is absolutely, the truth, and I'd have other people say the story's falling apart. And then all of a sudden, we're not looking at the ball anymore. We're in the stands, pushing and shoving in the cheap seats, and then somebody's beer gets spilt, and then we got real issues on our hands. And I think that's what's going on here at a lot of levels. People want to come forward. One thing about Grusch that I will say that does endear me a little bit is that he has never tried to make the first person claim and then go back and say. He's always been pretty consistent about, look, I am just the messenger here, and I've seen and been around these people that are doing this. Of course, it makes me want to know more. I want him to help me to go forward with that, and he can't. And that tells me a lot too. So is he still part of a program? Is he doing something on purpose? What's happening there? So I'll leave it at that. Don,
this intelligence thing?
Yes. Well, it's pretty straightforward. In 1994, in the fall, at UFO Magazine, I received a call from Orlando Disney. Okay. And they got a hold of me. They obviously knew who I was. I was the director of research for UFO Magazine. And they said, hey, we have a brand new attraction that's going to be premiering in the summer, around the summer of 1995 here in Orlando. It's called the Extraterrestrial Attraction. Okay. And it was a big, really big thing that they had been building. And I said, okay, well, we want to invite you to put together a 2-week UFO symposium, bringing in the top researchers from all across the United States, the people that you personally pick, and we want you to host it. So I said, well, okay, I'll tell you what, I've got to think about this, and I'll have my business manager get in touch. Okay. Now, at that time, I was being represented by a woman by the name of Lynn Russo, who, and boy, this woman had, talk about a catalog of hits. She represented people like Carol O'Connor. She represented, and I right off the top of my head, I can't, the guy on All in the Family that played the son-in-law, Mike Stivic. Carl, no, not Carl. that was his dad. Rob Reiner.
Yep.
Rob Reiner. Yep.
And she represented all the damn near all the actors in the Star Trek franchises. Now, how did I meet her? Well, she had been a representative, had been representing Dwight Schultz, Lieutenant Barclay on The Next Generation, and Howling Mad Murdoch on the A-Team. And Dwight and I were very close friends then. And she agreed to represent me. So I called her up and I told her. So she got in touch, and the long and the short of it was, okay, I'll do it. Well, this was to begin in January, the latter part of January of 1995. So I got together a list of some of the top people in the field, like Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., Zachariah Sitchin, George Knapp, Kevin Randall, Don Schmidt. I mean, there was a whole line of these people. Now, Disney flew them all down, and of course, with return tickets, they were broken up into two groups, week 1 and week 2. I was down there, of course, for both weeks. And we were put up at the Disney Resort. All meals were covered. During our off time, we had an all expense paid pass to the park, anything we wanted to do. And we went down there, and boy, we were set to give them hell. The first Monday, okay, of this conference, we go in, we have this big auditorium set up. It could have probably seated anywhere between 500 to 800 people. We file in, sit down. 3 people are in the audience. 3. Okay. This was unbelievable. There's nobody in the world more savvy than the Disney people when it comes to promotions and everything else. Well, as it turned out, they did not spend 1 red cent on promotion. Nobody knew this was happening. Nobody. So I got to tell you, I had mixed feelings. But wait,
wait. This is not the Don I know having mixed feelings about a situation like this. I just needed to throw that editorial comment in there. Martin, are you a little bit shocked? Do you have a Lieutenant Cedrone from the Casablanca? What? There's gambling going on in this establishment moment? Because I know Chris is. Look at Chris's face. He can't believe this either.
So let's take a step back and see what was happening in January of 1995. Now, there was a nascent internet, but the internet at the beginning of 1995, well, 1994, 95, is not even a pale shade of what it is today. Okay. I mean, if I want to look up, okay, Martin Willis, and I put Martin Willis's name in my search engine, boom, I got pages and pages of Martin Willis and his podcast, UFO, okay? Anything I conceivably would want to know would be there. But it wasn't like that. Now, everybody still gave their presentations. Bud Hopkins and Zachariah Sitchin, George Knapp, okay, Jesse Marcel Jr. I mean, all these people, just like we had a full audience. And this happened on both weeks. The highest attended day we had 12 people in the audience. As a matter of fact, Bud Hopkins was so enraged, he got up in the middle of the week and left. He just left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't tell me, Don, thanks for the free trip down here. Nothing. He just left. Now, the guy that was the honcho of this thing was a guy by the name of Rod Madden, okay? And I had some words I wanted to speak to him about. The second week, by the way, they flew in a TV crew. They filmed a Disney special on this UFO symposium, okay, hosted by Robert Urich, Spencer for Hire, okay. Guess who wasn't asked to appear on camera? Watashimo, okay? Watashimo didn't get an invite to go on camera. And I was kind of torqued about that at the time. But I said, okay, all right, whatever. Okay, we didn't even know they were going to be there. So, the last night, week 2 of the conference, they had a big dinner for the panelist at that time and me, okay? In the middle of the dinner, this Disney gopher kid came running into the place where we were having the dinner, and he said, Mr. Ecker, Mr. Madden would like to see you out in the hallway. Okay, so I get up, I wander out. He's standing there. Madden is standing there with some gopher beside him. This other kid came running up this hallway. And by the way, it's very dark in there, in this hallway. And Madden takes this box the kid is carrying. He reaches into the box and he said, well, we had a little something we want to present you with for the stellar job you did. And he pulls out this. Now you can just kind of barely see it, but that is a Mosker. And I said, what the hell's a Mosker? Well, that's a Disney Oscar, Don. Oh, okay. So he shakes my hand, hands me the Mosker. I walk back in, set it on the table, and then it hit me. Well, why in the hell didn't that son of a bitch come in and present it to me at the fucking table? Okay? I mean, this made no sense. So I go home and I start thinking about this. And I remembered when I was in military intelligence, and suddenly it became crystal clear. Whoever was in charge of this UFO business wanted to know, this is my theory, okay? And I'll tell you up front, this is a theory. I never got a signed admission from the government about this, but they wanted to know what in the hell the top UFO researchers in the United States were doing and were up to. Well, they couldn't go online and get it. So what did they do? Some genius decided to put together this 2-week program under Disney. And hey, we all know Disney has been singing the government's tune going back to World War II. Okay. And they said, hey, this is what we want to do. Now, on the surface, you're going to be paying for all this, but we'll actually give you the money for it. But we want to have all these people flown in, put up, fed, blah, blah. We'll have our people in the audience taking notes. And boom, it happened. Now, I said they sent a TV crew in there, and they did. They shot this thing with Robert Urich. They interviewed a bunch of people that were in the conference. They did all this stuff. And Disney, by the way, the CEO at the time was, oh golly, what was that guy's name? Michael Iger, does that sound right? Well, regardless, you can find it if you want to, because it's on YouTube. But they only ever aired this thing on television 2 times. The first time was in the middle of an afternoon, no promo whatsoever. It was just boom, it was there, about 3 p.m. The other time they aired it was after midnight, boom, no promo or anything else, it was there. Now, if you step back and you take a look at this, that was pretty clever on somebody's part, okay? And I've talked about this on a few occasions, but nobody really seems to get the implication of what this was all about. And gentlemen, I welcome your comments.
Well, Commander?
You're stunned, right?
Well, Don, one of the things that come to mind, I mean, it's not unusual for intelligence gathering to do exactly as you said. I remember the briefs that they gave in Europe. Certain European cities, they told businessmen that, you know, defense contractors that were coming, like, to, you know, different, like, air shows, and never leave your papers alone, because the different, you know, even though they're allies, their intelligence people would break into the hotel rooms, take everything out of the briefcases, photograph everything, put everything right back inside there, you know. So it doesn't surprise me. I'm kind of curious. Did you guys, any of you, ever notice post this that something was different at the house, that something was out of place? Do you think that this was a great opportunity to go through, you know, personal files and stuff that each of you kept in your homes? I mean, it's a great setup. You got the whole family going to Disney World, and this event, you know, and you're wide open.
Right. Well, at the time, I never thought about that, but we did have somebody, as a matter of fact, Vicky's mother at the time. No, I take that back. She had passed. Yeah, you got a point there. Vicky was gone 1 week, the first week, and then she was back at home in the second week. So yeah, it's conceivable. It's conceivable, Commander, that could have happened. But no, I never noticed anything out of whack.
Well, let's get back to Bob Lazar. I want to talk about Bob Lazar. Who wants to start off, Martin or Don?
Oh, Don knew him. So Don, I think it's only fitting that you should
Bob
talk
Lazar.
about it.
Okay, let's have some pictures up.
I'll do that. But go ahead, start, and I'll put the pictures up.
Okay. In late 1988, George Knapp had one of his specials on KLAS Channel 8 in Las Vegas. All right. He was a television journalist, and he would have these things on. And he brought forward in Electronic Blackout a guy only at the time identified as Dennis, which was a pseudonym. And he had some shocking things to say about having worked at a super secret, basically CIA installation, Area 51. Okay, now Area 51 today is well known. Everybody knows what they're talking about if you say Area 51 or Site S4, because of that guy right there on the screen, Bob Lazar. Now, that was the first one, and KLAS was shocked. They started getting inquiries worldwide about this story. So Knapp did a second special where Lazar came forward and in his own identity. All right. Now I got to tell you, I at UFO Magazine we were flabbergasted, and I called George up. I knew George, know George, and I wanted to come down and get the skinny. So I ended up, now this incidentally, this particular incident where I had gone down to Vegas with my buddy Richard Saraday, and there's a picture also of Richard. There he is. Okay, he's sitting in Lazar's chair. But we had gone down to interview him and do some snooping around about the Lazar story. Now, Lazar was, I got to tell you, on a personal level, I never was able to warm up to Bob. Okay. There's just an element to Bob that was, I found, off-putting. Now, the guy to the right was his, at the time, his best friend, Gene Huff. Now, look, I could talk hours about all the ins and outs that were going on at that time concerning Lazar. But his story maintained consistency from literally that day to now, okay? His story never materially changed. And I got to say this, at that time, when I was in his den, all right, with him, he could have gone on speaking tours from top to bottom. He could have cleaned up. Just hearing his name, people would flock because of basically the story he told. And what story did he tell? Well, this is where it gets even murkier, all right? He claimed that he had been hired at EG&G, okay, which were the people that were fronting workers going out to the site, but he had been hired to work on some propulsion. This is initially what he was told, some propulsion systems. He said then he got sent out, okay, went through draconian security procedures, okay, draconian. And he was basically everything short of being physically abused after he was given briefing documents to examine that basically said we had an extraterrestrial intelligence present on the earth that went back a very long ways, actually all the way back to prior to Jesus Christ, all right, over 2,000 years ago, and that we had at that time, he was aware of 9 recovered craft of some type. Now, his job, as he described it, was to work on one of the antimatter generators, and that these things were powered by something called element 115, which was according to him, a very stable element. Okay, now at that time, on our periodic table, there was no element 115, 115. All right, it had not yet made its appearance. Later it did, and it was a very briefly held element that dissipated almost as quickly as it basically was created. I'm no physicist. I don't understand how that works. But when I started talking to him about it, as it turns out, he had encountered Dr. Edward Teller when he was out at not the Area 51 site, but one of the sites where he allegedly had worked, and his name was found in the directory. Okay, he's outside walking one day. I guess it was in the summertime. Very, very nice day, warm. He saw Teller sitting on a park bench reading a newspaper. And on the front of the newspaper was a photograph of Lazar's jet car, which I got a photo of. Would you put that up, please?
Yeah.
Bob Lazar's jet car. There it is. Okay. Now, Lazar walked up to Teller and said, "Oh, Dr. Teller, my name is Bob Lazar. By the way, that's my jet car on the front of the newspaper." Now, this is something that Lazar had built. So they started talking. I don't know what the entire content of the conversation was, but it was Teller that Lazar said got him the interview at EG&G. So whatever Lazar said to him, okay, intrigued Edward Teller enough that he was impressed by Lazar. Now, some of the downside of Lazar's story, and believe me, when I was talking to him, I had on my detective hat, okay? I was looking to see if I could detect this guy trying to float anything past me, and I did not detect anything like that. He was very matter of fact, even perhaps somewhat arrogant, okay, in his presentation to me. And but the downside dealt with his academic credentials or lack thereof. And by the way, I had a number of conversations with George Knapp about that, because Knapp was desperately trying to find, any proof of his of his academic credentials at all. Now, Lazar
wait a minute, Don. Don, let me stop you there for a second, because I want to get around to the panel, because we're running out of time.
Yeah,
So
sure.
Let me stop you there. Martin, you've heard Don explain about Bob Lazar and his credibility, and there's some holes that people always talk about it. But I mean, there's stuff in there. I want your comment. You said that you got some information. I want to hear what you have to say about Bob Lazar.
It's not really that I have information. It's I have a new theory, and I have looked. Now, like Don, I have never met Bob Lazar. I saw him, but I was, in Phoenix when he was there. But as I wrote a blog, I did a lot of research, and my next guest, Michael Schratt, has done a lot of research as well. Stanton Friedman, as we know, deeply looked into his education. And, he was at the bottom third of his high school class, not exactly MIT material or Caltech material, as he claimed to be.
He went to
and
a
one of
junior
the
college, didn't he?
Pierce.
Was it a junior
He went
college?
to Pierce Junior College, and when he was asked to name a professor at MIT, he gave them the name of someone at Pierce. And also, when he was asked in a public forum one time, he never takes questions any longer in a public forum, but when he was, someone said, "Oh, what's the square right outside of MIT?" And he said, "Oh, I can't think of that right now." And everyone knows it's Kendall Square. If you went to MIT, if you went to lunch there once, you would know that. And also, I have a very good, close connection with MIT in the records department. They can do deep, deep searches. There is absolutely no way the government could expunge all the records as deep as she can go. And no Bob Lazar. There was never been any, professor. To me, when his story falls apart at his education, that all I got to say is, how can I believe the rest of his story once it falls apart at his education? But the theory, I'm just going to get this out because I want everyone to be able to talk. But I don't know, something about when I went to Grusch's this summer, I started thinking about at his hearing in the hearing in DC and all that. And I started to think, what if Bob Lazar knew someone very, very well and was taking that person's persona, and because he knows enough to make it very, very interesting, but there's no way in hell he would have ever been hired by the government to back engineer alien aircraft. There's just no way in hell. Someone who's been convicted twice of various, a couple of crimes, and there's no way they could excel. Don, he talked about, getting his clearance and what hell he went through for that. There's no way that he could have gotten that clearance in 8 days, that's supposedly what it took, 8 days. It's more like 8 months, for a clearance as high as he was supposed to be. So I just don't buy his story. I think he's, and I confronted George Knapp and on this myself. And I actually have, I can bring that up, but I don't want to take too much time. And also Jeremy Corbell. But anyway, I just said, George, you must know, that Bob is a fraud and you just can't let go. Basically, that's what I said to George Knapp. And anyway, it's on my blog. I copied the screenshot of our conversation. That's also on my blog. But that's my thoughts. I think perhaps he's taken on a persona of someone that really does have some information from inside there, and just went with it because his story has changed 4 times. The behavior panel did clips from all the way back in the 1980 or so when he first started talking about it, and he has changed his story 4 times. They point it out as they go through it. It's a really good thing to watch. It's on YouTube, how they dissected his behavior and his changes.
All right, one question I have for you, Martin, before I go to Commander. If Lazar didn't know anything about UFOs or ufology or S4 or anything, how did he know to go when they were testing? That's documented. There's video of him at the fence or at this location with people, and people have said.
I know. I've talked to John Lear about. John Lear was there. I talked to him about this too, and it's just by the same person would know that this person that he may be emulating may also had that information as well when they were being tested there. I don't know. It's just a theory I have because it's the only thing that really makes sense, because the government sure wouldn't hire him to do that job. And it's the only thing that makes sense that he knew as much as he has known is because he knows someone that knows this stuff. That's my thought.
You would be surprised at what the government would do, Martin. Trust me. If they had an agenda, you would be very, very surprised.
Yeah. Would you think they kill people, Don?
Yeah. Look, I wanted to just mention this, and then I'll let Commander Cobra jump in. But I saw a pre-taped interview with Dr. Edward Teller. Okay. And this was not in the documentary that they were shooting, but one of the producers said to him, Dr. Teller, what would you say if I ask you, do you know Bob Lazar? Teller, I saw this, all right. Teller got this strange look on his face, and with that heavy, what is it, Hungarian accent, he said, I will shut up. I will say nothing. End of story. That was it. So, Teller, it was obvious to me, knew who Bob Lazar was. Now, what their relationship was, I do not know. But I saw that, and I found his reaction to the question extraordinary.
Commander, your thoughts on all this?
Well, I like Martin's theory. Is he an early Grusch? Is he someone that was programmed for this? It doesn't. I mean, I think there's a lot of possibilities. I didn't have a very long relationship with John Lear. I had him on my show. We wrote quite a few times and we spoke quite a few times on the phone. John and I vehemently disagreed on a number of things, but I dearly loved the man, and I really appreciated what he was into and the stuff that he talked about, and he was a big believer in Lazar. I have my doubts because of all the things that you gentlemen have brought up, all the various trails that just don't seem to add up. I don't find that as disturbing because those kinds of covers and those kinds of alterations to people's real backgrounds can be done to discredit them. Like we were saying, we made the remark earlier that, well, he saw a psychiatrist. Well, in this world of PTSD and mental health issues being brought to the forefront, a number of active duty people and obviously a number of veterans seek and have those services. I find it quite aggravating when it's used as a tool against them to somehow discredit them because they're going through some kind of treatment or they've had some kind of treatment or some kind of counseling. That's a rather cheap shot. A lot of things don't add up. There's a lot of access and a lot of documented places that Mr. Lazar was at. Don, I think when I talked to you about him in the past, he does have he has an engaging personality. Is that a fair way to put it? That he does make a connection on a one-to-one kind of way. Is that true?
Well, other than his purported UFO activities, okay, we never really associated, except one time, and one time only. We were never on a truly personal level. Now, in that photograph with me and Lazar's den, the guy on the right, Gene Huff was his name, okay, in the white shirt, called me up at UFO Magazine. This would have been the latter part of the 90s, maybe 2000. And he said, Don, he said, I understand. Now, they all lived in Vegas. He said, I understand Zachariah Sitchin is coming out here to give a presentation. Bob and I and George Knapp would love to get together with Sitchin for a dinner. And could you arrange it? So I had a personal relationship with Sitchin, and I called him up at his place in New York, and I said, Zachariah, when you're out in Vegas, would you like to do this? And he was bringing his wife, and he said, sure. So we all ended up meeting at this Italian restaurant in Las Vegas. It was called Parma. Beautiful place, my God, the food was superb. And we had a very fascinating evening. Okay. But that was the only time that I ever had Lazar on a one-to-one level, I guess you could say, other than his story. So yeah, he could certainly be engaging. Yes.
Here's
If he
what
chose to. If he chose to.
Don, here's what bothers me about Lazar. Now, I'm not saying he's right or he's wrong, but looking into his story, his high school grades, let's go back to his high school grades, were such that he would never get into MIT. He wasn't brilliant. He wasn't one of these guys where, he was top of his class, a valedictorian. I mean,
you're right. You're right.
Because he actually had to go to a junior college. That's documented. He was at a junior college. Now, MIT, I can't vouch for MIT saying that they don't take anybody from a junior college, but you got to have some hellacious grades to get into one of these schools like MIT or RIT or something like that. That's one thing that bothers me about it. And
hey, don't get the impression that I'm buying his story.
Oh no,
okay?
I'm not saying that. I'm just
30,
pointing out
for 30 plus years, his story has been in my gray basket. All right.
Right.
Now, there's a lot about that story. The academic thing, of course, is one of the major roadblocks for me. But there were other things. When I talked to George Knapp about him, and I said, George, how do you know this guy is on the level? You've been trying to back check his academic records, etc. I said, what else did you do? He said, look, Don, he said, long before Bob Lazar, he said, I had other people out at that site, Area 51, okay? He said on different stories, it had nothing to do with UFOs, nothing to do with, with that kind of stuff, but it had to do with some of the secret technology. So I asked him, I said, oh, really? Okay. For example, where's the cafeteria? And the guy would tell him, okay, what color were the cafeteria walls? And the guy would tell him, well, how would you get to the men's room if you had to go to the bathroom? So the guy gave him directions on how he would get there. He said, I used that same criteria with Lazar. He said, when Lazar first came to me, and I asked him, well, okay, where did you guys eat? Well, we ate at the cafeteria. Well, where's the cafeteria located at? And he went through that whole rigmarole. And he said, Lazar passed all of that with flying colors. So I said, okay, all right.
But let me ask you this, Don. If he's as brilliant and he's working at S4 and stuff, why would he be involved with a prostitution ring? Why would he be selling illegal drugs?
Well, okay. Now I got a lot of background on that, pal. Okay, I do.
I want to hear it because he was caught in a prostitution.
Prostitution in the state of Nevada is legal.
Okay.
It's not legal in Clark County, where Las Vegas is. But Lazar, to coin a term, was a player. He loved the ladies. And I could tell you some of the names of some of the ladies that Lazar, shall we say, knew intimately. Okay. But he knew a madam in Las Vegas who came to him and wanted him to set up a security system and some computers for her, which he did. All right. Now, here was the fly in the buttermilk. All right. At that time, there were other competing television networks down there that were really butthurt at Knapp's stellar performance on those specials he did on Area 51 and Bob Lazar.
Yep.
So these guys.
Wait. I want to get this in before the show. I want to ask you this question. I want to ask you this question.
Make it fast.
Okay. if in fact he's a brilliant physicist, why is he caught selling illegal chemicals? See, I'm not saying that he's not real. I'm not saying he is real.
The guy's skirt's on the edge, Chris. That's what I was getting to.
That's really far edge, though, selling illegal chemicals. You explained about
What illegal chemicals are you referring to?
Well, I don't want to go down the Ivy League Hall of Fame, but Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was a Harvard grad. So, and he had all the great grades, and there's no denying that. There are people that are very, very smart that do play on the margins and get caught.
Okay,
Right,
so
I mean-
this madam, Lazar knew in the biblical sense. And he went down to set up this security system, which involved cameras, etc., and computer system for her business. Now, obviously, this madam had relations with the police department there. They were on the take. She was paying them off. But this other competing television station hired private detectives, PIs, to follow not only Knapp, but Lazar. They followed him going to this brothel. Okay? Now, somebody, hey, look, Vegas is a very freaking connected city. Somebody tipped Knapp off. All right? So, Knapp found out this other TV station was going to have this special on about Bob Lazar being tracked to a whorehouse. Oh my God, Bob, you got to come on camera and preempt this, which Lazar ended up doing. Unfortunately, this was an election year. The DA, the district attorney, was running for re-election. He needed a cause célèbre to get him back into office. He decided to go after Lazar. And they used a felony count against Lazar that hadn't been used in practically at that time a century, okay, that he was, and I forget now the term because it's been so damn long, since I immediately went down to Vegas, all right, and I was down there because I thought maybe I could help them out. They were railroading Lazar into the state pen, all right. Now he ended up basically.
I gotta cut you off, buddy, because we're out of time. It's the end of the show, but we'll pick this up at a later date. So,
all right.
The producer's telling me, cut it off. Folks, this is UAP Crossfire, another exciting show. Good night, everybody.